Hey everybody, I'm back with a new lecture all about experimental design. I'm really excited to be back, and I want to start with my favorite TikTok ever. I just think it's so funny.
Can I pet that dog?
No.
Can I pet that dog?
No, he's
Can I
sleeping.
pet that dog?
Oh, it kills me. Good stuff. I really want to meet that child. Alright, so there's a lot of news going on about the AP exams, and there's a lot of things that are different, so I want to go over it with you guys. So the new exam date is May 18th. Okay, and we're on Eastern time, so you'll be taking it at 4 p.m. So 4 p.m. on May 18th, that is when your test is, okay? So it's going to be split into two FRQs, so you're answering one FRQ, and then you submit it, and then you answer the second one. So the first one is worth 60% of the whole test grade, and you get 25 minutes to read it and respond, come up with your answers, and then you get 5 minutes to submit it. Okay, and it's all focused on designing an investigation. So you might be looking at an investigation that scientists already did, and then you're going to kind of break down its different components. And it's all going to be related to this class, so it's not like new topics, but it is surrounded on an investigation. So this whole video today is going to be teaching you more about designing a good investigation. Okay, so that's the first FRQ. The second FRQ is 40% of your grade, and it's more just the basic stuff that we've been working on, where you analyze a problem in the environment and then propose a solution, whether it's a government solution, a technological solution, or something like that. And you only get 15 minutes to respond to this one, and then 5 minutes to upload. Okay, if you want any more information, you can go to this site, but I'm also happy to answer questions. You're going to be able to use a computer, a tablet, or a phone, and you can also even just hand write them, your answers, and then you can upload them to this website. I'll go over more information about the actual website you'll be using and things like that closer to the test day, but just know this is the general information about the test, and it's only on units 1 through 7. Oh, and one more thing that is important, it's open note and open textbook. Since we don't really have a textbook in this class, remember you have all my videos, and you have hopefully saved all the notes that you've taken on those videos. So that's going to be a huge resource for you if you have kept those notes. Okay, they don't want you discussing answers using social media to share with your friends. They're going to be very strict about that. But you have me, you have all my videos, all the resources from this year to use on this exam, which is awesome. Okay, so I'm going to get into designing an investigation. So there are many steps that they want you to understand to design an investigation for this test. So I'm going to go over them with you, and then I'm actually going to kind of break down an investigation that I'm going to do myself. So these are the 5 steps they want you to be comfortable with. Sorry. I'm not going to read them out loud just for the sake of time, but we're going to start with step A in a few slides. But I just want you to know that I'm going to give examples of my own experiment, and it's all going to be about bananas. And you'll see why in a minute, but I'm using bananas as kind of my example for you guys, okay? So the first step in a good experiment is to identify some sort of question, a scientific question, not like what is the meaning of life, because that's not very scientific. It's more like philosophy. And then you want to come up with a hypothesis. So on the AP test, they might ask you, what is the hypothesis for this experiment, or what's the question being investigated? So you want to be able to know what that would look like, okay? So a scientific question is, what question are you trying to answer with your experiment? And for me, I'm asking about bananas. I want to know what causes bananas to ripen the fastest. That's my question that I'm out to solve, okay? So a hypothesis, maybe you remember from living environment, it's kind of like you're proposing an answer, a possible answer to that scientific question. So I'm trying to answer this question with my hypothesis. It's kind of like a claim or a guess, and then I'm going to back it up with some evidence based on what I know. I teach my freshmen the if, then, because form of a hypothesis because I do think it's pretty easy. Oh my goodness, sorry. It's kind of easier to form a hypothesis in that format. So here's mine. So sorry, my little face is in the way. If bananas are exposed to 12 hours of sunlight, then they will ripen faster, which is kind of answering my question. They will ripen faster than bananas exposed to less sunlight because the sun will speed up chemical processes that ripen the banana. So that's my hypothesis. I think that if a banana is exposed to 12 hours of sunlight, it's going to ripen faster than bananas exposed to less sunlight. That's what I'm out to test and I'm out to prove. So step B is going to be, for the AP test, they want you to be able to identify a research method that you should use. So what's the best way of testing this experiment? And there are all these different types of research methods or designs. There's lab experiments, field experiments, surveys, questionnaires, interviews, case studies, and observational trials. A lot of these things don't really work for science. You can't survey a bunch of plants and ask, hey, bananas, what's going to make you ripen fastest? So for me, I'm going to be doing a field experiment. The field will be my own home. If we were in school, we could do an actual lab experiment, but we're not. So most of the experiments they will give you will probably be their lab or field, but they might throw in like a survey of the people. That could be an experiment. You never know, okay? But today, or my example, is going to be a field experiment. So the next step is that they might ask you to describe one specific aspect of the research method that I'm using. So I'm just going to go over all the different aspects so that you have all your bases covered. So the first part would be the rationale, where you kind of just describe the procedure, like what you're doing, kind of very vaguely, and kind of explain why you're doing it to help you answer your question. So this is most likely not going to be on the test, but it would look something like, this experiment will involve 3 bananas placed in different areas that are exposed to different amounts of light. The bananas will be left for many days to grow. Each day their growth will be measured with a ruler. The 3 bananas will be in vastly different environments, which will lead to clear results. Okay, so kind of like an introduction paragraph to your experiment. So that might be what they ask you to do on the test. I highly doubt it, but this one is more likely. They'll have you look at the procedure of an experiment, or maybe even have you list out the procedure. I don't know though. But it's very simple. You just list out the steps of what you're doing. So for me, purchase a bundle of green or unripe bananas, separate 3 bananas from the bundle, place 1 banana under a window, 1 banana in a closet, 1 banana on a counter that receives medium light, measure the amounts of black spots on each banana at 9 a.m., and then repeat this step for 7 days, okay? So that is kind of the procedure that I'm going to follow when I actually do this experiment, and I am going to do this experiment for real later on, and you'll get to experience it with me. I'm going to do like a vlog style video, maybe, but that's what I will do. That's the procedure I will follow. And ideally, when you get a procedure, anybody could do it. So if I give this procedure to Mr. Hugenboom, he can go out and do the same experiment. If I give this procedure to any teacher, they're able to repeat it because the steps are very clear. Okay, so that's why procedures are important. They help so that other people can then do this experiment and people have a clear idea of what you're doing. And then the last part is really easy, just the materials. What materials are you going to use to conduct your experiment? For me, it's bananas, a measuring tape, and some sort of notebook and pencil. Very, very simple in this case. But materials just means what's involved in the experiment. So this is the same bullet point still. This is still describing an aspect of the research method. These are just more aspects of the research method. And these are the harder ones and most likely will be asked about because they are a little more tricky. So an independent variable is one variable that you intend on changing. So it's something that you're doing in the experiment to help you answer your question. So think about the one thing that I'm changing with these bananas to help me kind of answer that initial question that I had. So think about it in your head, and then hopefully your answer is that my independent variable is the amount of light each banana receives, because I wanted to see if light makes them ripen faster. So light is what I'm changing. 1 banana is going to be in no light in the closet. The other bananas are going to be exposed to different amounts of light. So that's my independent variable. Your dependent variable is something measurable. So just try and remember, if you can, dependent variable is always measured. It's literally something that you can measure, whether it's your height, your speed, or whatever. It's one thing that you can measure to kind of show you got results or show something happened in your experiment, okay? And you'll use that to, again, answer your scientific question. So it's more of the data you'll get. So my dependent variable is the amount of dark spots measured. I'm actually going to measure stuff on the banana, so that is my dependent variable. So I remember this in college because your independent variable, if you're independent, you don't need anybody, you can change whenever you want to. So think about an independent person. They're able to change their hair, get a nose piercing, do whatever they want because they're independent. So if you're independent, you're changing. So think of independent in an experiment as something that's changing, something that's happening to a group of people or a group of plants that's changing them. Okay, that's the independent variable. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable. So it depends on the results of the independent variable. So my dependent variable is amount of dark spots. The only way I'm going to get dark spots is if I expose them to light on the bananas. So dependent variable depends on the independent variable. Independent variable depends on nobody. It can change whenever it wants, and it's something that's changing in your experiment. Maybe that helps you, maybe not. And the last thing is controls. So controls are things that are going to remain the same, are constant. So that can just be different variables like temperature, the temperature is staying the same in my house and the amount of oxygen is staying the same. So those are things that are controlled in my experiment. There's also a control group in some experiments, not all, but most good ones have a control group. And the control group here would be the bananas in the dark, because they're not being given that independent variable. So the bananas in the dark don't get any light, so you could argue that they're the control group because they're the one thing that's not receiving the independent variable. So that makes them the control, okay? The next part is my favorite part. It's making observations or collecting data from what you've set up in your lab experiment. So first question you need to think of is, what data will you collect? In my experiment, it's pretty easy. I'm getting the number of dark spots and the size of the dark spots on banana's skin. So that's what I'm actually collecting from the bananas. How often will you collect your data? I'm going to collect mine once a day at 9 a.m. Where will your data go? Usually this is a graph or some sort of table. So for me, I made just like a mini table here. So I have the banana location, whether it's the window or the closet, the number of spots that I counted, 12 for the window, and then the diameter of the largest spot. So I'm just picking the largest spot on the banana, I'm going to measure it. Okay, I made these numbers up, but this is what your data could look like, this sort of table. And the last part about your data is you have to actually analyze it. You got to do something with your data. So for me, I'm going to compare the number of spots on each banana on their first day, compare it to their last day, and I'm also going to identify which banana had the largest spot based on its diameter, and then compare it to the other bananas and their location. So maybe the largest spot was actually on a banana in the closet, which would kind of change what I would think as the result. So you want to actually look at your data really closely. You want to analyze it instead of just collecting it and being done, which sometimes we did in our class because we ran out of time. We would just get data and then not do anything with it, like with the cookie mining lab. But it's not always perfect. Science is sometimes flawed. So that brings me perfectly to my next slide, which is most likely going to be asked about because it's always really important for students to understand that experiments can always be changed or modified. So you might have to explain one way to modify an experiment that would then change the results. Okay, so you can also think about how can this experiment be improved or become more valid. So what can you do to make this experiment better? What can you do to change the results of this experiment? What can you modify? So for me, I could have more bananas in each location. So that's what's called increasing the sample size. So that's usually always something that you can do to modify an experiment, is just get more numbers. If you're testing 50 people and a drug, test 150 people. So that's one thing you can do to modify. So I could have more bananas. I could have more locations with different amounts of sunlight. So I could have a window with full sunlight, a window with partial sunlight, a shelf with less than partial sunlight, a shelf with full sunlight, a closet with none, a closet with medium, things like that. So a longer time span as well. I could have measured for more than 7 days. I could have done a week and a half, 14 days, little things like that can modify an experiment, and also could totally change the results. You don't know until you do it. And then you can also, I only measured at 9 a.m., so I could have measured my bananas at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 9 p.m. to get larger amounts of data, and then I could use that to analyze, and maybe my results are a little different with that data. So all these things can be used as modifications to my experiment. Okay, they're anything you do that might change the results. So any of these things that I've just gone over, they might ask you about on the AP test. They might ask, how would you collect data on this specific experiment? Okay, they might ask you, what is the dependent variable? What's the independent variable? What's a control? They might ask you to create a procedure. I don't know because I'm not writing this test, but I just want to go over all the different steps with you, okay? I doubt they're going to ask you which type of research method, but it will most likely be some type of experiment, a lab or field, but you never know. So I'm going to come back to this slide and just go over this with yourself, because these are things you should be able to do on the exam in case they ask you. They might just ask you about part B to identify the research method. They might ask you about part E to explain a modification. So just be prepared for any of these A through E. Those are the different parts of an experiment that they might test you on. We're going to do a lot more practice with it throughout this week. I just want to give you an introduction to experimental design. We're actually even going to go back to some of our old experiments and think about them. So don't panic if you don't fully understand this yet, because you're going to get a lot more practice with it before the exam. Okay, bye everyone. I miss you.